Hello, welcome to episode 135 of the CRICKETher Weekly. Once again, we're recording a couple of days earlier than usual today, so we are recording this on Friday and it will be released on Sunday. So if any big news breaks on Friday afternoon or Saturday, Sid, then we've missed it and that's it. And never mind, because we can discuss it in next week's episode. Now, I've managed to drag Sid away from the new Taylor Swift album for long enough to sit down and record this, haven't I, Sid?
Yep.
Okay, so some big news this week from around the world. Let's start off in Australia. And there's been news that they have made an appointment to the vice-captaincy role. Alyssa Healy is going to be Australia's new vice-captain. So it was an interesting one when I read the press release about this, Sid, because I read it a couple of times and I sat there and I couldn't work out whether this meant that Healy is more likely to succeed Meg Lanning as captain in due course or imminently, because we don't know if or when Meg Lanning is coming back to cricket. So I couldn't work out whether making her vice captain was a signal that they intend for Alyssa Healy to take over the captaincy, or whether it's the opposite, and whether actually they're saying to her, no, we're giving you the vice captaincy and we're going to make somebody else the captain.
Yeah, of course, because they have got form for this, haven't they, Raf? Because of what happened during the 2017 World Cup. Do you want to remind everybody what happened during the 2017 World Cup and what Alex Blackwell, the then vice-captain, says about it in her autobiography?
Yeah, well, so Alex Blackwell was vice-captain for a few years, so she had that very distinct kind of leadership role.
And she had captained in the past at the T20 World Cup.
Yeah. And she captained them to victory in I think it was the 2012 T20 World Cup. Anyway, she'd captained them to a win, and because the former captain Jodie Fields was injured at that point, so she'd maintained the vice captaincy position under Meg Lanning, and then it got to the 2017 World Cup. And Meg Lanning knew that she might not be able to play in all of the matches because she had a shoulder injury that she was kind of managing. So what did they do? Instead of making Alex Blackwell captain, they brought in Rachel Haynes to captain, despite the fact that she hadn't played for Australia for several years at that point. So they kind of catapulted her in and put her above Alex Blackwell. And actually, worse than that, in Alex Blackwell's autobiography, she makes it quite clear that they hadn't communicated with her that that's what was happening. So she found out literally like a few days before the tournament that she wasn't going to be captain if Meg Lanning couldn't play in the matches. It was going to be Rachel Haynes. So quite poor player management there. So what I really hope has happened actually with Alyssa Healy is that, and it may well be that we as the public, as the media, won't be told this, but that hopefully they have actually sat Alyssa Healy down and made it clear to her at least what this appointment signifies. So whether it means that she is going to be Meg Lanning's successor, or whether it means that she's just going to be the vice captain and part of a wider leadership group. So you would hope that that would happen.
Now, if let's just assume for a moment that Meg Lanning does come back and resumes the captaincy, and obviously they're separate questions, and obviously they're open, and anything could change over the next few months or year or so, and she could come back at any point, or she could decide not to come back at all, and obviously she's going to make that call, and that's totally up to her. But let's assume that she is going to come back and that she's going to come back as the captain. That means what they've done is they've appointed quite an old, on cricketing terms, I mean not old as in human terms, wait till you're 50, Alyssa.
but old as in...
They've appointed quite an old senior player as the vice-captains, which means that actually what they're doing is quite like what England have done. They are not, it's very explicitly saying this is not our next long-term captain. Now that's exactly what England have done with Nat Sewell. They've appointed somebody to the vice-captaincy that everybody knows is not going to be their next long-term captain. That's not to say that either Alyssa Healy or Nat Sewell might still have a couple of years as captain, but neither of them are going to be a 10-year captain like Meg Lanning or Heather Knight. And so now you were quite critical of England there for not using the vice-captaincy to kind of groom a future captain. Do you think Australia have done the wrong thing then, Raf?
Do I think they've done the wrong thing? Well, I think you can just read multiple things into this appointment. I think it's come at an interesting time. So it's a little bit of an odd time in a way to make this announcement, isn't it? Because of the fact that they didn't really have to announce it. They haven't got any international cricket kind of coming up particularly imminently, I don't think. And so I don't really understand why they've decided to do it now. To me, it possibly therefore means that they are going to make somebody else the captain. So my feeling, and I don't really have a personal relationship with Meg Lanning at all. I don't have any personal insight into what she's planning to do. I feel though my instinct is telling me that she is going to come back, but she's not going to come back as the captain. And I think that she probably will come back, just because I think that from her perspective, it might be not the best way to end her career in this way. I mean, obviously she just captained Australia to gold at the Commonwealth Games, so brilliant. But to then have this long period of kind of speculation and uncertainty about whether you're going to come back or not, my feeling is that she will come back and play a bit more for Australia, because she'll want the kind of send-off that Julian Goswami had, and probably frankly deserves that kind of send-off given what she's given to Australian cricket over the years. So I think that she will come back, but I think that perhaps she won't want the scrutiny that the captaincy role brings when she does come back, because we all know, and we've talked about this recently with the Nat Siver stuff, it is that off-pitch stuff, it's that talking to the media, it's having to be the one who always comes out when you lose, and the journalists like me are hunting for quotes, that kind of thing. That's the thing that puts kind of mental strain on you. So I think maybe she'll come back, but she won't be captain. So what I think is going to happen is that in due course, Cricket Australia are going to appoint an actual captain to succeed her, and the name that is being particularly bandied around and has been mentioned on WBBL commentary a few times, and I think that those are the people who are in the know often, is Ash Gardner, and that would make sense, and that would be probably the right step forward in terms of thinking about a longer term captain.
Yeah, Ash Gardner is certainly a much longer term prospect, and she could potentially have 7 or 8 years at the captaincy if she became captain at some point next year. So but I think the key point was the one that I made before, is that what I hope they've done is actually had that conversation with Alyssa Healy already and made it clear what this appointment signifies for her personally, because she's also been someone who's given a lot to Australian cricket, and potentially has more to give. I mean, is there a possibility, Sid, that this has been given to her as a way of actually preventing her from retiring? Well, yeah, that is an interesting question, isn't it? The motivations that we're attributing here could be completely different. So she's inevitably at her stage in her career. I nearly said her age again. At her stage in her career, she gets asked this question by the media, and her attitude has been very much, while I'm enjoying cricket, I'll carry on playing, and then when I stop enjoying it, I'm going to stop. Now, if you were at the management of Australia and you were going, how can we ensure that she carries on enjoying it and that she wants to continue to maintain that commitment, and that she doesn't decide, I've had enough and I'm going to go off and start my family, which she's always made really clear that she does ultimately want to do.
Yeah.
Well, one way of doing that, you might think, if you were the management, you go, well, if we give her the vice-captaincy, that will kind of persuade her to stick around for another couple of years. It's just a possibility.
I mean, it is a possibility.
It's pure speculation.
I don't think that's massively likely, because I think the Australian way often seems to be, we don't give people things unless they've really earned it, unless we think they really deserve it.
But she has earned it. She does deserve it.
Yeah.
She's definitely not an undeserving candidate. It's exactly because she deserves it that they could be giving it to her for those reasons. Anyway, all will become clear.
Okay, so we've speculated on that for 8 minutes. Let's move on to the next bit of news, and that is back closer to home in England, and relates to the ongoing question as to who is going to succeed Lisa Keightley. Now, we don't have an answer to that quite yet, and I believe that recruitment process for the new head coach of England is ongoing, but we did have an announcement about the new England sort of assistant fast bowling coach, who is going to be working very closely alongside whoever does succeed Lisa Keightley, and the new fast bowling coach is Matt Mason, who I will be honest, don't really know very much about. He's worked mainly in men's cricket, possibly exclusively in men's cricket, and he comes from the Warwickshire men's county setup. That's where he's been working most recently. According to the media around his appointment, he's been quite successful in his role in the men's game, and is now kind of making the move across into women's cricket. So it's an interesting one, isn't it, Sid?
Yeah, because there's a couple of interesting questions here that I don't want to talk about. The first is that what's really fascinating for me is that this is another case of them tying the new coach's hands. So when Alyssa Healy came over, she was allowed to basically bring Tim McDonald with her. Tim McDonald had been her kind of long-term Robin to her Batman, and
I'm sure that's how they thought of themselves.
Yes. And so she was allowed to basically bring him, and he came as part of the package, if you like. Whereas what they're saying here is another thing of like, whoever comes into the England coaching role, everything else is already set up before you. So the people that are really exercising control over the shape of the next couple of years for England continue to be the current management team. So the current management team are going, whoever comes in, this is your new first bowling coach. You're not going to bring in a fast bowling coach of your own. This is the one that you're given. So it kind of changes the balance of power slightly. You might think that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm actually okay in principle with people bringing in their own team, because a manager needs people around them that they can absolutely trust. And this is really common in other sports. Look at football. In both the men's and the women's games, it's really common for when you appoint a new manager to a top club that they bring in their team. They might in the women's game, they might be only bringing one person, but they'll bring in people that they've known for a long time that they trust, and that that they can kind of sound off privately, if you like, with. So the new coach isn't going to get quite that opportunity.
Yeah.
So that's significant, and I think that says something about the kind of appointment that we're going to get, in terms of like we're going to get an appointment with someone that is prepared to accept the kind of everything else around them being unchanged from the current kind of status quo. And that's just we're going to see the continuation of that status quo with England over the next couple of years.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And yeah, possibly Charlotte was right to withhold her application.
Yeah, because she'd have almost certainly wanted to bring in Anya Shrubsole as her fast bowling coach.
Exactly that. Anyway, that's that bit of news. Another big bit of news this week in relation to England. We've got our under-19 World Cup squad. And it's the first ever under-19 World Cup squad for England, obviously, because it's the first ever women's under-19 World Cup, going to take place in South Africa in January. So we now have a squad, 15 players, but also 5 reserves as well. I won't read out the whole list because it's obviously available online. Just a couple of names that kind of sprung out to me. It's really good to see Sophia Smale in there after she had that kind of fortune of getting selected for the 100 as a replacement, an injury replacement, and then just totally bossing that tournament.
Take your opportunities.
Yeah.
Seize them with both hands.
And of course, Sid is really happy because his favourite, Grace Scrivens from the Sunrisers, is in there. So yeah, you're pleased, Sid?
Well, yeah, pleased-ish, but who's going to be the captain, Raf? That's the question for me.
Well, it is an interesting question, isn't it? Because it's a bit of an odd one. I don't know that I've ever seen a squad announced before without a captain. And that was the first thing that sprung out at me. And I was immediately onto the ECB saying, there's no captain. Why? Is
this a mistake? Have you typoed your press release?
Exactly. And the answer is no, they haven't chosen a captain yet. And I think that's quite interesting. I wonder whether they want to get the squad together a bit more and just see them play and interact with each other. I mean, for us, looking at that list, we don't know all of these players very well. Let's be fair. But there's one name that absolutely screams out that should be the captain. I mean, Sid's already got her pegged for captain of England in about 5 minutes' time. But let's not run before we can walk. So our kind of candidate is Grace Scrivens, and I don't think it's any secret that she is definitely utterly leadership material. But it may be that there's some others in there that Richard Bedbrook, who's sort of in charge of this selection process in his role at the ECB, maybe has his eye on. So that's an interesting one. Yeah,
I mean, he'll make his decision in his infinite wisdom. Yeah. And I guess that one of the things that's important to remember about this squad is that the number of people that will have seen all of these players play more than 1 or 2 games is probably quite close to 0.
Yeah.
It certainly won't be more than 2 or 3. Because there'll be a number of people that will have seen most of these players play once or twice, in competitive matches, but there just aren't that many competitive matches in the academy setup. So the number of people that will have seen all of them play multiple times is quite small.
Yeah, I mean,
so they want to get
all...
the squad together before they start making these decisions. But in that light, here's another interesting thing that they did. Why then did they name the 15 players that are going to go and then say, and plus, here's another 5 players that aren't going to go but are going to attend all the training sessions? Yeah. That seems a bit of an odd thing to go, well, these are our kind of nominated ones and these are our spare parts. Why was that decision made so early? Because that feels a little bit odd as well. That feels like the kind of decision taken by somebody that maybe doesn't know teenage girls very well.
I remember being a teenage girl, Sid, and I can tell you that that will be uncomfortable, especially for those 5 reserves who have, as you say, they've got to turn up to the training, and there will be that element of, with teenage girls, there's always those kind of hierarchies and that obsession with social status. I think I can fairly say that, having been one. And so it is gonna make it a bit strange. I wonder whether there was some requirement for the ICC that they had to announce an actual squad in order for them to put various arrangements in place. So it may be that. I was just going to say that in terms of the number of people who have seen these players play, not very many of them were actually in the hundreds. Because obviously they're quite young, and the 100 is dominated by senior players. Obviously Smale, we've mentioned Sophia Smale, I should say, because there are 2 S Smales in this squad.
Not even that, Ref. There are 2 SA Smales. One of them's S Anna and one of them's S Anne.
Okay. So don't
ask me which one's which.
That's not going to be confusing at all. So whoever's printing the shirts should be aware of that. Hi ICC, please can you make sure that your shirts are printed correctly? So Sophia Smale played in the 100. Davina Perrin, I think, was in the 100. Grace Scrivens, McDonald Gay. So a few of them were in the 100, and that's the kind of most high-profile tournament that most people would see. But then the others have obviously mainly played in regional cricket, and even for me, a couple of the names on that list are a bit unfamiliar.
Yeah, we've seen the ones that play at South East Stars and at Vipers, because we've been to a handful of junior matches and practice matches and things over the last couple of years. We've seen some of those players, and we've seen Mary Taylor play, for example. We've seen Alexa Stonehouse play, but not huge numbers of them. So
the other thing that we should also flag up, Sid, which I know will be absolutely gutting to you, is the point that was made by Polly from Naughty Child. No Southern Vipers players in the main squad.
Yeah, no. I mean,
Southern Vipers.
There would have been a Vipers player if Freya Kemp hadn't been in the main England squad. She obviously would have gone. But yeah, so no Freya Kemp and no Alice Capsey in this squad. Both could have gone, both eligible. Not there.
Well done. Well done for glossing over the absence of Southern Vipers.
Successfully glossed.
Okay, let's deal with the Kemp and Capsey question, because we actually had this debate on the vodcast a few months ago, I think, maybe, when we heard that there would be an Under-19 World Cup, and we were debating the different selections that might arise. And my view was very much that England would and should select Kemp and Capsey, even if they had played for England by this point. They should select both of them, because... And to be honest, I stand by that, because it's such a great opportunity to be in the conditions in South Africa. It's effectively like a free warm-up for your under-19 players, who then may go on and play in the main World Cup. So I just can't understand not selecting them. I suppose from the ECB's perspective, they may have a couple of things that have prevented them, or that have made them not want to select those 2. The first one may be to do with workload, which is obviously an issue that has arisen this year and last year, in terms of there being so many more matches for the England players. So I suppose that's a possible consideration. The other thing is that they may be looking at this Under-19 World Cup and going, no, we are actually going to treat it as a development competition, and we want to give other players who haven't had those opportunities the chance to kind of come through and sort of make their mark and show what they can do in an international tournament that's quite a unique opportunity. So those are both probably the reasons that the ECB would give, I guess. And it's interesting. I suppose as well, you could say they might be thinking, oh, well, Freya Kemp, she'd have to take, therefore, 2 months off school just before her A-levels instead of 1 month. So those are all kind of considerations. The other reason that I've seen kind of bandied around a little bit on Twitter for why they should have selected Capsey is that she should have been given the opportunity to captain the side. Now, I don't really agree with that, actually, I have to say, because I think that I don't really see Alice Capsey as a captain. I see her as the kind of, she's your best player. She's your kind of charismatic star. She's like your Ian Botham or your Andrew Flintoff. Yes, I may be. But some may think I'm over-egging the pudding here. But she's your real kind of your big standout player. And those players don't make very good captains. And I don't know that if you asked her whether she'd say that she wanted to be the captain. I think that it would actually make more sense to give it to somebody who clearly has demonstrated leadership potential, like Grace Scrivens. So that's just that's my thoughts about her as captain. Anyway, that's all we've got time for this week. Thanks for tuning in as ever. See you in a week's time. Bye for now.
Bye.